Okay, I into some ways. 79b. First one is two Mishnayos with the first one. Bishami, I remember Peter Adam is Ishla Viget Yashin. Bisil Eisron. Shammai says that one is allowed to use an quote unquote old get, a get Yashin. We'll explain what that means in a second. Bisil Eisron, Bisil says you can't give a get that is outdated, it's old. What makes a get outdated? Get Yashin. If they were secluded together after the divorce was already written. Okay, what's the concern here? It says the Gemara, what's the debate about? What's the concern here? The concern here is that they were intimate and maybe she did conceive, and people will calculate on their own the child was born after the woman was already divorced, which is not exactly a good look, and therefore the rabbis invalidated the divorce. What if they were secluded after it was written? Amr Abba Amr Shmuel, and this is loyteitze. If she did get married using this divorce, she doesn't need to get divorced and leave the marriage. The divorce is still kosher b'diavad if it was done already. So the first opinion says basically if they were divorced with a get yashin, an old get, they don't, and then she remarries, she doesn't have to get divorced from her second marriage and have to get reissued. The second version of the Gemara is not only does she not have to get remarried, if she was divorced with an old get, she's allowed to get married l'chatchila. As the question here is how far do you take if it was already done? What does it mean if it was already done? If it was already done that she was divorced using the old get, the get yashan, or does it mean that that after a get yashan she has already gotten married to another man? That's just how far you're taking. That's the two versions of the Gemara. Says the Mishnah, Koslov Shamachas She'en Hagenas. The Shamachas Modai, the Shamachas Yavan. The date on the, so we spoke about this many times, the divorce has to have a date on it, and the date is to the wrong kingdom. Okay, just get a little ahead for a moment here. What's the in here? What's going on? The date that is written in the divorce, the rabbi said, has to be the date of the local monarch. And the reason for this is sort of Dr. Shalom. It's a sign of respect to the local king. So what happens if he wrote it to the wrong king? He wrote it to a king of a different country. For example, he wrote L'Shemachas Madai, the kingdom of Media. Now keep in mind that there was a kingdom of Media at the time of the Gemara, at the time of the Talmud. The kingdom had long been destroyed. Or even L'Shemachas Yavan to the Greek Empire, which was replaced by the Roman Empire by the time the Mishnah was written. Okay, or he writes Labinyan Habayis since the temple was built. Now, obviously, at the time of the Mishnah, the temple was destroyed. So he wrote, according to whatever year it would have been, how many years ago the temple was built. Or he wrote L'Churban Habayis for the destruction of the temple. Okay. We'll see in a second. Yeah. Basically, he was on the east and he wrote the divorce in the west. He was on the west and he wrote the divorce in the east. In other words, the divorce was written in one city and it was given in a different city. And the document states the city that it was given in, not the city that it was written in. So the divorce is if you have the wrong place in the document, so then the marriage that follows from an invalid divorce is not kosher. Okay, in other words, according to this opinion, we'll see this is the opinion of Rameir. Rameir basically says that the rabbis said this is how a divorce has to be written. And if you change one iota from it, then the divorce is invalid, and subsequently any marriage that she has later is also invalid. Because she's still technically speaking an Eish, a married woman. So what happens is she has to leave both her first husband who gave her this invalid divorce and her second husband, and she needs divorce from both husbands. The Ainlon, she doesn't get like Subav, like Paris, like Mazanis, like Belois, so she doesn't have any of the privileges that typically a ksuba would get her. She doesn't get the 200 zuz. She doesn't get clothing. She doesn't get support. She doesn't get redeemed. And if she took, she has to give it back, and the child of both from that point onward is going to be treated as mamzer from both the first husband and the second husband. Okay, if one of them is kayin, they don't become tummy to her. They don't get to keep her lost objects or her income. They can't nullify her vows. If she was a regular Jew, she was not a kayin, but she married, let's say her first husband was a kayin. She can no longer eat. She can never eat truma again, even if she marries. Sorry, she can't get married again to a kayin. She can't get married to a kayin again, and the reason for that is because we treat her like a zayna. We treat her action as one of adultery. She was married to the first husband. She got married to the second husband. It's an act of adultery, and therefore she can't get married to a kayin. Bas Levi, if she's the daughter of a Levi, min meiser, she can't eat meiser. Now, as we've discussed many times, the fact that meiser goes to a Levi is what the Torah says, but at a later point in time, Ezra decreed that the meiser should not go to a Levi. Regardless, meiser could be eaten by a regular Jew as well. So, what exactly is the problem here with the daughter of a Levi eating meiser? The answer is there really isn't a problem. It's sort of a penalty, but it's, technically speaking, there's no violation here. The next one, however, Bas Kayin Minat Truma. She's the daughter of a Kayin. She can no longer eat Truma. Now, even though typically the daughter of a Kayin who does not have children is able to eat Truma, this woman cannot. The inheritors of each one do not inherit her ksuba. What's the ksuba here? Ksuba here is ksuba's benin dechran. So if you remember, we spoke about the woman's male children inherit her ksuba. What's the practical difference here? There's two scenarios where this makes a difference. In other words, the husband dies, the male children inherit the husbands. So who cares if they inherit their mother, they inherit their father? It's the same money. In other words, okay, so the guy dies. His wife's ksuba was 200 zuz, fine. So she takes 200 zuz. And then the male children split the rest of the inheritance. Let's say it's 1,000 zuz. There's 5 kids. Each of them are going to get 500 zuz from their father, and 200 zuz from the father and 40 zuz from their mother. What's the difference if it's from the father or their mother? It's the same amount of money. Mm-hmm. The answer is there's 2 differences here. First of all, if the guy has 2 wives, each one of them has either a different number in their ksuba. One has a large ksuba, one has a smaller ksuba. So now all of a sudden the kids from both marriages are going to have different amounts. Or if he has a different number of kids, even if they have the same ksuba. So he's married to 2 women. They both have the same amount of ksuba, 200 zuz, but one of them has 2 kids and the other one has 5 kids. The same thing. Another difference would be if one of them is a bechar. So the bechar would not take a double portion in the portion of his mother. Okay. Anyway, so neither the sons of neither marriage get ksubas ben dechran. If one of the brothers dies, called simple yabmin. 1 second. I'm sorry. If one of these husbands dies, the brothers can do chalitza but not yibam. Obviously, because they don't know. We sort of prohibit her to both husbands. Okay. That is the first statement of the Mishnah. The Gemara will explain this statement is Rameir. Rameir says even if you make these minor mistakes like having the wrong place or the wrong type of date, it's the correct date, but it's the wrong format. Then we say teitzi mizeh vlad mamzer, where the Gemara says sometimes kol hadrochim ha'elu bay. All these things are in it, meaning that we treat her as violating the law, marrying a husband while she's married to another husband. And therefore, she has to get divorced from both husbands with all these penalties. Now we get to the mainstream opinion, which is another way to invalidate a divorce. Shina Shma Yushma, if the names are switched, Shem Ira v'Shem Ira, the names of the cities are switched. Teitzim Zem Zeb Kol Drachma Elabah. She has to get divorced from both husbands, and same set of rules. She basically loses every privilege. Okay, now we get to another similar set of circumstance. Kol arayas she'omer tzaraseh mutaras. If you remember, Chamesh Esrei Nashim. It's been a while, about a year, a little less than a year. No, more than a year actually. Chamesh Esrei Nashim. 15 women that exempt their wives from chalitza. First parak in Yevamis. Basic rule of chalitza is if the husband dies without children, then his wife or wives are eligible for yibum. What happens if one of those wives is, let's say, the sister of another brother's wife? So there's an error there. She can't do yibum. Because she can't do yibum to one of the brothers, therefore we say that the co-wife is exempt from yibum and chalitza as well. Remember that?
How can we forget?
Okay. 15 scenarios. Okay. So now what happened was, this guy was married to 2 women. Okay, one of these women was a sister to the wife of one of the brothers that are still alive. Except that she's underage, she's not yet mature. Okay, fine. So they go to court, and the court says, listen, you're not eligible for yibum because one of the deceased brother's wives is a direct relative to one of the brothers' wives. So therefore, you're exempt from yibum. So she went ahead and she remarried the co-wife. They both got remarried. V'nimtzu elu islandess. Okay, what happens? Turns out that the co-wife that's a sister to one of the brother sisters is actually an islandess, meaning she's infertile. This type of infertility means that she'll never mature. She's now 25 years old and she's no sign of maturity. Okay, therefore, what happens now is that presumably the original marriage is null and void, because he married a woman thinking that she was fertile, not recognizing that she wasn't fertile. Okay, so what happens is, so now the woman who got remarried is stuck. She's really is a kukali liibum. She cannot get married. There is no kedushin with her because she's in line to get yibum, and therefore she has to leave both husbands. She can't do yibum. She has to leave her second husband, and with all these penalties that we discussed previously. Okay, this is going with the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says that there is yesh mamzer mechayve lavin, because if you remember, the violation of a shemeres yavam is only a lav. Most arayas chayve krisis. This is just a lav. However, Rabbi Kiva says that violating a negative commandment, even if the penalty is merely lashes, also creates children that are mamzera. So this line of the Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Kiva. We'll see that in the Gemara. Similar situation here. Somebody who does yibum. Okay. And the co-wife went ahead and got married to somebody else. It sounds like a legitimate story, right? To a brother, the deceased brother has 2 wives, no relationships to anything. One of those wives is chosen to do yibum. It happens to be she's not yet mature. They're married. The brother does yibum. 10 years later, they figure out she's infertile. She'll never mature. She's an islandess. Now we have a problem. If she's an islandess, that means that her marriage was never valid. That means that her co-wife actually was really the candidate for yibum and not her. So now her co-wife is stuck. Her co-wife went ahead and got remarried to some random guy. And now, but turns out that she's actually a kukala yibum, because the one who actually did yibum wasn't eligible for yibum, because she turned out that her original marriage was never valid. So the car went got married to somebody else, and him to Zusha islandess. Turns out that wife is an islandess. They have to get divorced, and all these things, all these pathways all these penalties are in effect. Okay, so weird story. The scribe wrote a divorce for the husband and a receipt for the wife. The receipt, obviously, to indicate that the husband paid up the ksuba. The Tom and the Sefer made a mistake. He gave the divorce to the woman, and the receipt to the husband. And then he gave a divorce, thinking it was divorce. He actually gave a receipt. And the woman, thinking she gave back a receipt, actually gave a divorce. I don't know. A couple of years later, they open up their documents. And what happens? The man is holding the divorce and the woman's holding the receipt. So obviously there was never a divorce. So she has to get divorced from both husbands because it was an illegal marriage. She was a married woman at the time. And with all these penalties, the Mishnah lists.
The story is open
Fair enough. Okay, it's interesting. Rabbi Lazar has a very interesting argument here. Rabbi Lazar Reimer, Imla alter yatsa ein zaget. Lachas mana raise zaget. So Rabbi Lazar says it depends. If they open their mail immediately, we'll have to explain how long immediately is, whatever immediate is, but they open their mail immediately, and then they find out, turns out the man has the divorce, the woman has the man has the divorce, the woman has the receipt. So then we say, yeah, you have to give over the divorce again. However, in La'achar, but if this happens years later, or some amount of time later, we'll have to define that when we get to the Gemara. Harei get, it is a valid divorce. We don't trust that actually this is what happened at the time of the divorce. We suspect that there is some game being played here, and therefore we don't. We presume that divorce was actually given correctly. Okay, Gemara 88. What's an example of let's say, an inappropriate kingdom? Malchus Haromium, the Romans. Why is it called a kingdom that's inappropriate? Because they don't have a written language or a spoken language. Okay. So apparently, even if you live in Rome, you should not be writing the divorce on the Roman dates. I'm no student of history and the exact specifics here at the time this is written, and maybe somebody else wants to do the homework, and I'll be happy to. I'd love to read the conclusions. Apparently, I guess it's before the Julian calendar. I don't know how the Julian calendar has anything to do with Rome. Maybe it is. It doesn't. I don't know. Anyway, the point of the Gemara, the Gemara is saying is that Rome does not have a language or a spoken language or a written language, and therefore it's not the document shouldn't be dated according to the Roman date. Okay, does this have anything to do with the fact that it probably wasn't written under Roman control? I think so. Presumably, if the Mishnah was talking contemporaneously, the Mishnah was written in the questions where the Mishnah was talking about Bavli or Israel and who had control at the time. So I'm not 100% sure. It seems like the fact that their dates were taken from other nations is why the dating system isn't the correct one to use.
Yeah, again, they said that you have the ultimate language of other nations.
Okay, yes, it seems it's not considered the indigenous language, and therefore doesn't work. 1 second. Okay, Amar Ula says they matik the Malchus Gittin. Why do you have to write according to the local monarch's calendar? Mishum Shalom Malchus, to keep the peace. So Gemara says Mishum Shalom Malchus takes Mamzer. So it's just about keeping the peace. So let's say the guy makes a minor mistake and he writes a different country's dating system. They tell me the child has to leave, the wife has to leave both marriages and the child is a mamzer. So Gemara says correct. Yes, I will say that. Why? This is the opinion of Rameir Latamei. Rameir, according to his own opinion, Amar from Nunam Shmuula, Amar Rameir would say, Kol HaMishana Gittin Havla Mamzer. If anyone changes from the inscription that the rabbis demanded with regard to divorce, the child will be a mamzer. In other words, divorce has to be followed to the T. Yeah, it's interesting. We just had something came up recently about regarding divorce, and I was asked to comment about something, and I was a little concerned. I made some phone calls, and I was told this fellow does not know how to write a divorce. And learning our Mishnah, don't know how to write a divorce. You better stay far, far away from that, because it's very easy to invalidate it. Now, even though according to Meir, it's like super easy. But even according to the rabbis, if you mess up the names, if you look in Shulchan Aruch and Gittin, there's a number of pages with how to spell names. Just lists of names. Just lists of names. Okay. Next Gemara, L'shumachas Yovan, to the kingdom of the Greeks, Assyrian Greeks, with Tzricha. Okay, the Mishnah gives two examples of Modai and Yovan. Okay, remember here. So let's try to understand this. What's the purpose of why we're writing the dates? To keep the peace with the local king. If you talk about a different kingdom, I would say that that's the greatest insult, because you're using a different kingdom that currently is still ruling. In other words, you're writing in America the date system of Zambia, which is another country that still exists today. I don't know what dating system they use in Zambia. I presume the Africans probably have some other type of system. Do they have their own way of writing it? Do they use January? Or do they have their own Afrikaans spelling of it? That would also be considered unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I don't even know the South African languages that are different from the
Okay, so some other country that doesn't use the Julian system according to the system the way it's used in America. Of course, being written in America, that would be.
What about
that wouldn't work.
When you write the day, then the month, then the year, instead of the month, the day.
That would also be good. That would also be a good example. That's a very good point.
I mean, that's
exactly. It's very common. Steve is saying a very good point. Month. We do month and year, right? And in most countries, not most, a lot of countries that do date, month, year. That would also be a difference. Okay, so if you wrote that system, that's a system that's currently used in a different area. Okay, and that could be insulting to the monarch. But if you talk about ancient civilizations, like who cares? The monarch isn't as insulted because he used a monarchy that doesn't exist today. Part of the ancient history books. Okay, maybe if you write the date of a kingdom, well, at least you wrote a competing kingdom, and that's why the monarch might be offended. But if you write the building of the temple, the temple is not a monarch, and therefore maybe the monarch won't be offended, and therefore there's no requirement to write the date in that format. Okay, okay, maybe the monarch would not tolerate the building of the temple because they don't want the temple to be built. They don't want people to remember the good times. But if they write the date the temple was destroyed, or they're remembering the bad times, maybe that they don't mind. Kamash Malon, they know out of respect for the kingdom, you need to use their system, not any other system, even if it was a part of past civilizations. If he was on the east side and you wrote on the west side, man, who exactly? The husband. You have to write which city the husband is from. So if you wrote the wrong location, then you've changed the husband's location. And we're talking about here changing the location of the divorce. It must be cipher. The date of the place of the scribe, where the divorce is actually being written. The Amrlu Rav L'Safrei, like Rav said to his scribe, and Rav Huna as well told the scribe, call Yisivisu b'shili ksuvu b'shili v'avkav demimsu chumili b'hini. If you were told to write the divorce in Hini, it's a location, and you ended up writing it in Shili, then write the location is Shili, not where he told you to write it, but where you actually wrote it. The same thing's true the opposite. And if you're in Hini, you should write the date of Hini, the location of Hini, even if he told you to write it in Shili. Rabbi Yehudah Shmuel. Rabbi Yehudah says in the name of Shmuel, Zudiv Rameir, this is the opinion of Rameir. Okay, Santer is the ancient equivalent of the surveyor, the guy who knows how to draw the borders. So every town had the expert in the borders. This guy, he remembers back in the day the original guy that originally owned it, and he had this rock over here, and that's where the border is. So apparently this is a prestige. This is like the elder of town had this prestigious position of being the surveyor. So if you wrote the date basically based on when the surveyor took power, Harazim Gereshus, the divorce is valid. Okay. Higita to have a sivbe l'shem istandra the Biskar. I think Biskar is the name of the city. Is that correct? He wrote to the apparently there was a it wasn't the king. This was the let's say the mayor of the city. So instead of writing the monarch of the country, he wrote the mayor of the city. This is how long the mayor was in power of the town of Biskar. Shalchar of Nachman bar Rav Chizda l'kamei d'Rava. So Nachman, son of Rav Chizda, sent this question to Rava. What's the story? Is it get kosher or not? Shalach lei. He sent to him, Baha afilu Rameir Maidi. And this Rameir agrees. My time up. He's a mayor that's appointed by the same kingdom, and therefore it's not an insult to the monarch. Umayshnom he sent to Shabir. Why is it different than writing it? In other words, what he was saying, what Rabbi was saying is, this is kosher even according to a mayor. This fulfills the requirement to write the monarch's date. Writing the monarch appointed mayor's date is the same as writing the monarch's date. In other words, according to this year of the mayor of Biskar's rule. So Gemara says, why is it different than a surveyor? Surveyor is also appointed by the king. So Gemara says, the surveyor is a job. It's what somebody does for a living. The mayor, that's like a prestigious appointment. And therefore, it pays respect to the monarch. Amr of Abba, Amr of Huna, Rav Abba says the name of Huna, Amr of Rav, the name of Rav, Zudiv Rameir, Al-Chamimim Havlad Kosher. 1 second. Again, Amr of Abba, Amr of Huna, Zudiv Rameir, Al-Chamimim Havlad Kosher. Okay, so the rabbis disagree with Rameir. In the first case of the Mishnah, if you wrote the wrong type of date, you wrote the date of a different country, the child would still be kosher. However, if you changed his or her name, or you wrote their respective cities incorrectly, in that case, then they agree that the child is a mamzer. Okay, if you remember in the Mishnah, this is actually listed as two separate entries. The first entry in the Mishnah is he changed the type of date. He wrote the Greek dates or the media dates. The second set in the Mishnah, the second bullet is where he changed his or her name or the location of either one of them. It's two separate entries. So Amar Rashi says, we have a raya to this from the Mishnah that Rameir and the rabbis disagree with regard to changing the date format, but don't disagree with regard to changing the man or woman's name or their location. Okay, what's the proof? Okay, second bullet of the Mishnah, they changed, he wrote incorrectly his or her name or their locations. Divorce is invalid with all the penalties. Who's the author of this? If you're saying it's Rameir, then it should be one big Mishnah. The Mishnah should list, he changed the type of dating system used, or his or her name or their locations. But the Mishnah doesn't, it gives two separate bullet entries. Must be that there's actually disagreement. The first entry is Rameir, the second entry is the rabbis, it's a valid proof. Kol arayis shamru. Okay. So now we got okay. So now we're going to the scenario of one of the 15 women that exempt their co-wives from Yibum. There was some sort of relationship with her to one of the brothers. Now, what happened was they got married. It turns out the relative is actually an islandess, and the co-wife, right? So let's say of the two women that are co-wives, we'll call one the co-wife. One will say is the critical relative. The critical relative turns out to be infertile. which means the co-wife's remarriage is against the law, because it turns out she actually is a kukali yibum. She is a shemeres yavam. Okay, nisu in zinuloi. They give her the penalties if she got married. But let's say she violated the law of shemeres yavam. She slept with somebody else without getting married to her. We don't give her the penalties. Rav Hamnuna says that if a shemeres yavam has an inappropriate relationship, not in the marital context, she loses the privilege of being able to do yibum. You have to do chalitza now. So our mission seems to be otherwise. Seems to indicate that no, specifically a marriage would make her problematic for yibum, but not not if she had an inappropriate relationship. And the reason for this is very simple. The reason is because it looks like she actually was exempt. In the case of a marriage, she got married. Everyone thought she was exempt from yibum. Now it turns out she wasn't exempt from yibum. So we treat her as currently eligible, and therefore her second marriage is completely invalid, and she will require chalitza. Okay, so Mara says not necessarily. It could be that if she had an inappropriate relationship, that would also be in the same category. The reason why the Mishnah said the example of getting married, the Mishnah wanted to give a kosher example, where she was well-meaning, as opposed to znus, promiscuity, when she obviously wasn't well-meaning. There's a second version of this Gemara. This is true of when she got married, and similarly, if she had a promiscuous relationship. Okay, let me style it from Nuna. In other words, so the second version of the Gemara says the same thing is true whether she got married or whether she had a promiscuous relationship. That seems to support the opinion of Rav Hamnuna, that in the case where shemeres yavam engages in a promiscuous relationship, then she is not eligible for yibum, and she gets all the penalties. Obviously, she doesn't have any penalties from her second husband because she's not married, but she has all the penalties from her first shemeres yavam, the potential yavam. So this seems to support the opinion of Rav Hamnuna. The Rav Hamnuna says shemeres yavam shezinsas really yibma. A woman who's waiting for yibum, that is mizana, she has a promiscuous relationship. Asur really yibma, she's not eligible for yibum now. So Gemara says, no, not necessarily. The Gemara is saying, no, it's not a. Gemara in the second version wants to say that they have the same law, promiscuous relationship and marriage. Gemara says, no, not necessarily. It could be that they don't have they're not the same. They actually are different. It could be that only in a scenario where she got remarried, that looks like a woman, that looks very similar to the scenario of a woman who is the woman who claims her husband died. It turns out her husband didn't die, where we give her the penalties of having to leave both marriages. That it looks much more similar in a scenario where she actually got married. In a scenario of znus, where she just had a promiscuous relationship, nobody knows about it. No, people don't take it as seriously. Therefore, there's no comparison, and there's no reason to penalize her and not allow her to do yibum. Hopefully we'll finish this last Gemara. Let's see. Okay, so the Mishnah gives two examples. One version was where you had the tzara, the co-wife, was what we call. Phrase this, I'm sorry. We have two scenarios in the Mishnah. Try to say this as distinctly as possible, so you don't get confused. The scenario we just spoke about was where there were two wives. One we call the co-wife, one we call the critical erva. Right? Turns out the critical erva is infertile, and therefore her marriage retroactively was never valid, and the co-wife is an eligible shemeres yavam. The second scenario we had was where there were two co-wives. Neither of them were a critical erva. One of them did yibum as a child. Turns out her marriage was never real because she is infertile. So we'll call her the married yivama. Her marriage was never actually valid. And we'll say the remarried co-wife, the other woman, now is the real shemeres yavam, which means her second marriage is actually incorrect. So, and we say in both scenarios we give both of them the penalties. So the Gemara says, well, why isn't one scenario sufficient to make both results obvious? Why does the Mishnah need to repeat both scenarios? It's richa. We would have just spoken about the first scenario. That's the scenario where we talk about the critical erva. The critical erva was ineligible. Her marriage was nullified retroactively. Because yibum was never fulfilled. Because the critical erva exempted the other wife from yibum. So Yibum was never fulfilled. That's why we give you the penalty. But in the second scenario, where she did everything proper, they actually did a proper Yibum. At least they thought it was proper at the time. Turns out it wasn't Yibum because she was an islandess, and they were retroactively her marriage to the first husband was never valid. The dead brother. Maybe you don't give a penalty when they try to do the right thing. Okay, now let's flip this around. Let's see what I've just said, the scenario where they tried to do the right thing, where both women were eligible for Yibum. One of them did Yibum as a child. Turns out she was an islandess. Her marriage to the deceased brother is retroactively invalid. And therefore, the other woman who did not do Yibum actually is the Yavama. She is the Shemeres Yav. Let's see. So in that scenario, we give her the penalties of having to leave both husbands. Well, okay, at least over here, they both were in a state of Yavam. Either one was an eligible Yibum partner. So therefore, it makes sense to give them the penalties of having to leave both husbands, because each of them was an eligible Yavam partner. But in the first scenario, no, there was a critical error. There's a critical error, there's no Yibum at all. It's Amalai, maybe we shouldn't give them penalties. Therefore, it had to give both scenarios.